I said, we started a series last week entitled Putting Mary Back into Christmas, and we looked at the story of the wise men last week and how they brought their gifts to Jesus, and we learned the very important aspect of worship is about giving Him our treasures. And we talked last week about giving. And so today, I want to continue with this series of putting Mary back in your Christmas. And today we're going to learn this truth, and we're going to talk about this truth, that less is more. Everybody say it with me. Less is more. And we began today with the story of the shepherds, Luke chapter 2. We'll pick up in verse 7. And this is kind of the springboard into the rest of the scriptures I'm going to share with you today. And the Bible says, she brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields. If you want to underline something today as a thought, is that living out in the fields. Living out in the fields. Keeping watch over the flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around about them, and they were greatly afraid. This is very familiar to most of you. Let's continue with verse 10. It says, Then the angel said to them, Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes. He'll be swaddled in cloth. And suddenly there was with them an angel, a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And so it was, when the angels had gone away from them into the heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, Let us now go to Bethlehem and see this thing which has come to pass, and which the Lord has made known to us. And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in the manger. Now verses 17 and 18. Now when they had seen him, they made widely known the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all those who heard it marveled at those things which were told them by who? The shepherds. And so I want to talk today on this aspect of less is more. Our text tells us that the shepherds were living out in the fields, keeping watch over the flock. At best, these shepherds were common, ordinary men. They were certainly not the social elite of the day. And more than likely, the only home these shepherds had was the fields. It's where they stayed. It's where they spent their time. And so at worst, they were homeless, they were vile, and they were dirty men who were social and religious outcasts. Either way, they had few, if any, personal belongings. And yet it was to these shepherds that the announcement was given. And it was these shepherds that went and saw the child first. And it was these shepherds who went and published it and told everyone. And it was these shepherds that everyone was marveled at what they said. So they were ordinary men with very few, if any, personal belongings. In contrast, most of us have been programmed to believe not that less is more, but that more is more. Lay's potato chips. How many of you like Lay's? What was their commercial? I'm not sure if it's still prevalent, but for years it was, bet you can't eat just one. It's the idea that more is better. And for most of our lives, we all believe this truth, or this idea, that more is better. If $1 is good, $2 is better. Yeah, we'd all say that. If one car is good, 2 is more insurance, yeah. If one is good, more is better. And we live with this idea 365 days a year, but it especially comes up during the Christmas season. I mean, we've got closets packed full. I'm going to say more about that later. And we want what? More. More. And my thought to you today is, if you want to put the Mary back in your Christmas, then realize that less can be more. Let's look at Ecclesiastes. The wisest man who ever lived recorded these words, and he said, better to have one handful with quietness. I thought about you. Than 2 handfuls with hard work and chasing after the wind. It's better to have a little and have peace than to work yourself to death and still not have enough. It's like chasing the wind. You can't catch it. There's no end to this idea of wanting more. Now, if we're going to talk about less is more, we need to define that a little bit. Less of what doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what it is. Less is better because I can experience more of what does matter. See, we live it differently. We live, and especially during Christmas time, with this idea that more is better, thinking we can experience more. But how many of you watched your kids open Christmas presents, and they got so many, they open a gift, and then they toss it over here, and then they open another one, and they toss it over here, and some of those gifts are forgotten a day or two after they've been given. In fact, if you give your kids a lot of gifts, they might only enjoy one, 2 at the most. But the adults, we're the same way. I need more clothes. I need new golf clubs. I need a new Ford truck. I need this, and I need that. And you don't have time to enjoy all of this and that. And so the first thing we need to do with this whole idea of less is more is we need to recognize what really matters. What really matters. And if I asked you today to name the top 3 things that really matter in your life, most of you would say something like this. You would say, my family, my health, my friends, my food, a place to live, my football, clothing, transportation. How far down would you have to go before you mentioned your bank account? Outside of that shelter that you live, and maybe your transportation, most of us never mention our other possessions. And so that tells us that if they're that far down the list, they really don't matter that much. What really matters is your family. What really matters is your health. What really matters is having a place, a roof above your head. What really matters is knowing God. I hope that would make your list. But no one puts on their list how much money they've got in the bank. Nobody puts on their list that leather sofa you just bought. No one puts on their list those new countertops that you finally got that you've been wanting. Nobody lists how many Instagram followers they've got. Or for those of you who are more my age, how many Facebook friends you got. Nobody lists those things. And nobody says how many people you have to play Fortnite with. Or what level you're on Pokemon. Or some other. Yeah. Those things aren't that important. And so when you define what matters most, you'll recognize that so much of our lives are spent pursuing things that really don't even make the list. And that's why our Christmases do not have the merriness in them. That's why it's not Merry Christmas. That's why we say, oh Lord, it's Christmas. Now, don't look at me like you don't do that. I know you do. And so the next thing that we need to do is not only recognize what really matters, but secondly, we need to, here it is, we need to learn to cut back. Well, preacher, you look like you need to cut back. It's true. That's true. I worked with a lady one time, and she was thin. And I'd say she probably was thin by nature. But she told me one time, she said, people don't eat because they're hungry. People eat because it's lunchtime or supper time or snack time. And it's the idea that more is better. You say, preacher, you're way too personal now. Don't start talking about my weight. Well, that was extra, or that was not in my notes, so you can't hold it against me. Yeah, that's the problem. It's extra. We need to learn to cut back. Sorry, I snorted, didn't I? That was a good one, Dad. Remember what Jesus said? He told that story about the man who had an abundance. And he said, I know what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger, more. And Jesus said, your life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. We really ought to write that across our check card, our credit card, or our checkbook, or on each bill here in Christmas season. Life does not consist in abundance of possessions. And you know what? Here's the worst thing. I'm just sharing a little bit out of my heart. It's not only that we live that way, but we teach our kids to live that way. We pass on this insatiability. more is being better. So we need to learn to cut back. Now, you kids won't remember this, and you Generation Xers won't remember this, but the baby boomers, you were a kid, and you can remember it. Anybody that's beyond the baby boomer, said, what are you talking about? Okay, if you're older, do you remember when houses had one closet? I can remember that. I lived in houses. My grandmother's house had one closet for the entire house, for the entire family. And you know what? It was not a big walk-in closet. It was about the size of me and Danny put together. It was about a 3 by 4. And in those days, a man had, most women didn't work outside the home in those days, but a man always had at least one suit. Why did he have a suit? He had a suit for Sunday, a funeral, or to bury him in. And it hung in the closet. He might have maybe a couple of nice shirts, maybe a couple of pairs of jeans, maybe a pair of overalls. And that was all his clothing. He had a pair of work boots, shoes, and maybe a Sunday pair of shoes. And the kids, they just had play clothes except for one outfit for Sunday. Same with the shoes. And the women, they had a Sunday dress, maybe a couple of other things. And the whole family could put all their belongings in one 3 by 4 closet. You say, boy, I'm glad we don't live that way anymore. When we think about our closets, we can walk into them now. We can walk into them and there's not just one in the house, there's several. There's one in each person's room, and each person has their individual room. Plus there's pantry closet, plus there's a linen closet, plus there, and on we can go depending on the size of the house. And we walk in our closets and we move through them, and while we walk out, what do we say? I don't have anything to wear.
That's what I said this morning.
Sometimes we have so much stuff in our closet that it won't even fit. And you know what we do? We put our stuff in our wife's closet, or vice versa. And if we can't get all the stuff in all the closets, you know, what do? We put it in the garage. And we got so much stuff in all the closets and the garage that what's supposed to go in the garage? We can't get it in the garage. And then if the garage is full and all the closets are full, we put the stuff in an outbuilding out back. And then, if there's no outbuilding, what do? We rent something. And sometimes we drive across town to put our stuff in storage, and after a while you get tired of going there, and you just never go there anymore. You just pay the rent each month, And you haven't seen that stuff, you haven't used that stuff. And so when you finally look at it, you're thinking, why did I keep this? Why did I keep this? Why did I keep this? Look at your neighbor and say, we got a problem. Yeah, we got a problem.
You gotta go there.
Yeah. We're paying somebody to store our stuff. And we need to remember, not just at Christmas, but especially at Christmas this season, that less is more. Remember our scripture in Ecclesiastes? Better is a handful with peace than a bunch of stuff in two hands that you got to work to keep up. And you can't keep it. The most meaningful thing at the end of our life, it's not our stuff. When your parents or your loved one die, it's not the stuff that matters. What matters is that you miss them. I was telling Annie, this week I had a couple of days where I just really missed my mom. That's what really matters. We need to want less stuff and more experiences instead of more stuff and less experiences. And so we need to learn to cut back on our consumption. Now, I understand most of us didn't grow up that way in this day and time. You talk to those people that lived through the Depression in the 30s, and they know about it. But most of us didn't grow up that way, and it's hard for us to live that way. We think more is better. And we keep our stuff, and it's not always just possessions, but you may say, well, I got this when this happened, and there's sentimental aspects to it. But you know what? All that sentiment, most of it you won't pass on. It won't mean the same thing. Because better is a handful of peace. I'm not telling you shouldn't have anything. And I'm certainly not saying that you shouldn't enjoy the Christmas season. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have nice things. It's okay to have nice things. Somebody said, but don't let the nice things have you. Sometimes you may have a lot of junk. You need to learn to look at it from a perspective about life. It's better to have a few nice things than to own a bunch of junk that owns you. It's better to have something you love, something that you use, something that you enjoy than a bunch of stuff that just clutters up your life. The richest people in the world are the people who are content with the things that they've got. Now, let me prove this and then we'll wrap up. One final thought. How many of you have been on a mission trip outside the U.S.? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A few of us. When you go on a mission field outside the U.S., especially if you go to a third world country, by the way, you don't have to travel across the ocean to do that. We crossed the border from El Paso into the Juarez Valley. And I'm telling you, there were people living in slack pallet houses in cardboard in some sections. You go on a mission trip somewhere to a developing nation. You spend 4 or 5 days there. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen every single time. I've never heard it where it didn't happen. The first day you get there, you're going to know, you know what's going to happen. Your heart's going to break. Your heart is going to break when you see the living conditions. Some of them don't even have running water. They don't have shelter that's adequate. They've got dirt floors. Some of them don't have electricity. By the way, we've got some folks just like that in Dalton. And you go, how do these people live? Their poverty, it breaks me. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. And then a couple of days into the trip, you kind of get used to it. And it's not as shocking as much as it was at first. And you start to look, and the kids are outside playing with no shoes on. And they're enjoying themselves. And they're not inside all day playing video games or on an iPad. They're laughing and playing, and a lot of times there'll be moms out there laughing and playing with them, occasionally a dad. And then you go to a worship service. And when you go to a worship service, you're going to see some people who worship, who have absolutely nothing, and who worship like they have everything. And you're thinking, these people's got something I don't have. Happens every time. They have a deep sense, passion for the Lord. And this worldly possessions does not even compare. They don't live with this lust for more. They're just like, well, we have what we need to get through. They live with this idea of, give me this day my daily bread. God meets their needs. And on about day 4 or 5, you start to look at those people who have nothing and are very satisfied, and you start to feel jealous. You start to feel jealous because they have a simple lifestyle where they just simply trust God, and they're not encumbered by the things of this world. I want to ask you to take that thought with you today as you leave here. And when you see all the trees and the tinsel and the the magazines and all the commercialization. And I want you to remember that. That stuff is not going to make you happier this Christmas. And that stuff is not going to make your kids happier. They may wonder why I didn't get all the stuff this year. But you know what? You can give them so much more when you teach them that less is more. And while you're there, you make a promise, when I get back, things are going to be different. And they are. For 2, 3 days. And before you know it, you're right back, sucked right up into that materialism again. And so I want to give you a final truth here. In order to learn that less is more, we need to practice contentment. And I use that word practice on purpose, because to practice something means that you know, those teams that played yesterday, they practiced. They put sweat and tears into it. They worked at it until certain things became second nature to them. And I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm telling you, you've got to practice contentment. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 8, the Apostle Paul lays it out so clear. He says, godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment. He didn't say godliness with a lot of money in the bank. He didn't say godliness with a nice church. He didn't say godliness with great air conditioning and great facilities. He didn't say godliness with a great house. He didn't say godliness with a great car. He didn't say godliness with the right spouse. He didn't say godliness with kids that behave. He didn't say godliness with any of those things. He said godliness with contentment. That's great gain. And then he goes on and he elaborates. He says, for we brought nothing into this world, and we can take nothing out. If we have food and clothing, we will be content with these, he said. And so I'm telling you today, we've got to practice this. And you know what? We've just got one chance to get this right. Our life is just a vapor. It's here today and gone tomorrow. It dawned on me yesterday. I knew our anniversary was coming up, and in end of December, we're going to be married 34 years. That's a long time. And it's went by just like that. I remember when Hannah was born. We were married 8 years before that. And we don't know what we did with those 8 years. And then when Hannah was born, and now she's off living on her own. She'll be 26 her birthday in a week or two. A couple of weeks. She's getting old. Life is a vapor. It's here today and gone tomorrow. We've only got one chance to get this right. You can't put it off. And you've only got one chance to mark your kids with this truth. Please understand that your life is too valuable. Your calling is too great. Your kids' lives matter too much for you to waste this opportunity. I promise you, my kids are happier because we didn't have a lot. And we taught them, if you have a need, pray about it. They'd asked us sometimes for something that was beyond anything we could do. We wanted to give them nice things, but it was beyond it. And I said, I gotta give credit where credit due. Tammy would say, she'd tell us, let's pray about it. And they learned that they didn't have to have everything. And if God didn't supply, they could be happy with that. And I still see that in their lives today. Your life's too valuable. Practice contentment. I'm going to ask you to bow your head with me.